just released his 113th pop single. 113th pop single. Human Work of Art. In 1958, the Daily Mirror's headline asked, "Is this boy too sexy for television?" Yes, yes, right. Well, tonight, 35 years later, I just saw him outside. He looks much the same. And so we ask, is this man too sexy for television? Will you welcome Cliff Richard? Well, thank you very much. Thank you. I hope you hear that welcome loud and clear.
I certainly do.
Now, tell me, what is the secret? What is the secret of the fact that you're eternal youth, always looking young? I mean, what is it?
I don't know if there's a secret, and it's just not true. I mean, I'm not young. I mean, now that I've hit 40, I'm 52, and the thing is that people are chasing the wrong thing, really. You can't chase youth. It's always going to be going away from you. I'm closer to my death now. I've got less years ahead of me than I've got behind me now, so I'm very conscious of that. But if I don't look my age, I just have to consider myself lucky, really. I don't know that there's a secret.
Because you made a joke once about one day you wouldn't mind having cosmetic surgery one day if you felt like it, but...
Oh, no.
But you never have so far.
No, but you see, I mean, I've seen people who have had it done. I mean, probably one of the best examples, it happens to be a woman, of course, Cher, who looks, I think, absolutely stunning in her movies, absolutely fantastic. And if I'm still singing at 70, Dave, and people still call me the Peter Pan of pop, then I would have to try and live up to that.
Yeah.
And if I wake up one day and it's all lying on the bed beside me, I'll have it all put back. It's just one of those things.
What about this single, number 113 or whatever? Single. Does it matter to you as much? I suppose it can't do. How well this one does as one of the early ones?
It kind of matters more now, because in the early days, everything was new, and when the Shadows and I first got started, there kind of was nobody before us in Europe. In America, yes, but not anywhere in Europe. And so everything we did was okay, because it was all kind of new and fresh. Nowadays, we're not new and we're not fresh, although we have to try and appear fresh, and the competition is hot and young. And so for me to have a record that comes into our top 20, I mean, it's real celebration time, because I almost feel as though I'm living on borrowed time now. I don't know that I ever expected to be around this long, and to have successes at this stage, that's to me that's the bonus time. I suppose in a way, about 10 years, 15 years ago, I probably thought to myself, yeah, I could spend the rest of my life working living doll, yeah, in clubs. But it's not at that, it's at a different pace though. I still actually get top 10 hit records. And I think that's what really, cheeses off my critics and amazes me.
And the critics that actually cheese you off are the ones who really don't give you... You said once that they only think of you sometimes in the rock and roll world as second rate or whatever. The critics that actually cheese you off are the ones that don't give you sufficient credit for what you've achieved.
Yeah, I suppose so. In a way, it doesn't really worry me that much anymore, because you can only do a sellout tour. And if you do a sellout tour, the fact that somebody's really slagged you off may hurt at the time you read it. But then after a couple of days, you think to yourself, well, the people are still coming, they're enjoying what you do. And I think quite often the critics forget that really we are not working for any individual. We're working for a group of individuals who over the years prove that they like what you do. So I know that I can't do Shakespeare. I mean, it would be ridiculous if I even attempted it. But what I do appeals to certain people, and so I go for that. I go for that area and that group of people. I don't pretend I'm going to set the world on fire again the way we did when we kicked it all off 35 years ago. And so for me to have, sometimes they write me off. They say I'm bland and predictable, and I think, well, that's unfair as well as untrue. I mean, I'm the one that's recorded with Sarah Brightman and the young ones. I mean, hardly predictable, and certainly not bland. I think sometimes they don't actually know what you do. They don't listen to words.
That's right, because that quote you made about many rock and roll artists, I'd always be a second-class citizen. The thing no one catches me up on is that my second-classedness has lasted longer than most first-class.
Yes.
I mean, that was your way of putting it.
Well, that's right. I mean, and funnily enough, sometimes I come across on the offensive. because I found it so difficult being defensive the whole time. And sometimes these days, I think it's wrong, really. I must get it out of my system. I think it's dangerous to be offensive. Hey, I'm really great. Because it can come across, you know, really badly.
Oh, that came across very strongly.
Did it come across strongly? Oh, well.
No messing about.
The thing is, I mean it, but I don't want to say it.
Yeah. Now, it all started, the career really all started in May of '56 when you first heard Elvis on the radio.
Yes, that's right. I mean, my career didn't start then, but the direction I wanted to go...
was born then.
That's right, because, you know, when you think... There were some fantastic singers around. There were the Bing Crosbys, the Frank Sinatra, the Perry Como. There was Rosemary Clooney, Teresa Brewer, Peggy Lee. I mean, wonderful singers, but they didn't inspire my generation to be like them. They were just on the edge. They were on that cusp. This was another generation. This was my aunts and uncles and my mum and my dad. And when I heard Elvis, suddenly I knew what I wanted to try and be like. And I've on my last tour, I was explaining to my fans that really the hard fact of life that many of us, thousands of us, had to learn, that none of us was ever going to be like Elvis. He really was the prototype and a one-off.
And I mean, you tried once to meet him and failed, and then by the time when you could have met him, he was so bloated that you thought it would be too sad to do so. Was that right?
Yes, it was, and it was very silly of me. Now, I'd rather have met him regardless of how he was. It was just that, you know, Elvis in his last days was either very fat or very slim. He'd slim down for movies and then get very huge. And at the stage when I'd released a record called Devil Woman and it was a hit in the States, I went out to promote it, and a journalist said, look, I can arrange it. My paper will take the photographs. We'll get you to meet Elvis. And I said, look, hold off a minute, because Elvis looked very bloated. And I still have, you see, intact the image that influenced me. The pictures I saw of Elvis at that time were not kind, and I didn't like them. And so I'm glad in one way that I didn't meet him. But on the other hand, I'd like to have met the legend, the real. You know, they bandy the word legend around a lot, but Elvis was really one.
Out of those 80 million records, Cliff, or more that you've sold, a great many of them, as with Elvis's, were about love and so on. What would your definition of the word love be?
Oh, well... I find it frustrating because I've talked about love a lot, and I've certainly sung about love almost every record I've ever made. The trouble is that our language is very limiting. The early sort of, like in the biblical terms, Hebrew language, they'd have like one word that described the love you feel for a brother or a sister, or husband and wife, and another word for God's love for us. You know, so there are almost different definitions. And we are lumbered with just love, and we use it if we want to say, I love you, my darling, or I love...
She's gone. She's gone. This woman is gone. She's gone. She'll be back with us soon.
Well, thank you, but I have to also say that I love the skin of custard.
Oh, and there's two custard freaks over there. Look, very wild.
So it's an unfortunate thing that we don't have it, but I would tend to fall back, and I guess it's because I'm unashamedly, I'm biased towards Christianity. I feel the best definition comes from the Bible, and that is, it's almost like negative. Love is not ugly. Love is kind. Love is gentle. Love is not boastful. Love is understanding. Love has patience. All those things kind of sum it up. And if you could squeeze them all into a relationship, then I think you've got it winged.
And now I want to come on to the Christianity in a moment, but on the love subject, in his very interesting, because the interesting thing is the degree to which you have, in a sense, denied yourself some forms of love, in a sense. I mean, and as Steve Turner says in his very interesting biography, that with one brief exception, you have actually chosen to be totally celibate all your life.
Well, I hate the word celibate. I mean, in my head, I'm not celibate. I mean, I'm a Christian, and so any Christian would be able to sit here and say exactly the same thing, that when the Bible says that sex outside marriage is not on, I don't always understand why the Bible says these things. I don't entirely think I understand even that, other than recently, in recent years, I've read things where they say that people that sleep around a lot have great difficulty in holding one relationship together, which probably has a lot to do with the fact that people are divorced very easily. So as a Christian, I say, okay, I don't understand it. I don't necessarily like all the rules, but I'll attempt to live by them as best I can. So that I'm not alone in this. And the reason why I don't feel celibate is because I've made no vow. Okay, if you're a priest, a Catholic priest takes vows. If you're a nun, you take a vow saying, I vow celibacy. To me, that is really a celibate. I could tomorrow become married. I could tomorrow, you know, be whatever you want me to be.
We've got some volunteers here.
Yes.
Yeah. But so you don't feel you've taken, but up until tonight, until you meet this member of the audience, as you leave here,
Yes.
You have chosen, with one brief exception, to lead a celibate life, haven't you? And that was not just for religious reasons, because you started doing that before your conversion in 1965-66.
No, my brief encounter was before I became a Christian, obviously. When I became a Christian, everything suddenly fell into place for me. For my life, I felt happier and more satisfied. As I say, some of the things that you read in the Bible aren't always things that you understand instantly, and some of them are hard to take, and I guess there are areas like that which are hard to take. But to me, if God is God, he actually knows best for me. And so far, I have to say, I have a very happy, settled life. I don't know that I'll ever be married. I may never be married, whereas I could say that to you now without being worried, whereas when the Shadows and I first got started, it really worried me. The band were getting married, my friends were being married, and I was dating girls, but I wasn't married. The danger for me then was that I might have married just because everyone else was getting married. And somehow or another, now I don't know how I did this, but I didn't do that. That didn't happen to me.
I can see how that once you became a Christian, obviously, that sex outside marriage was, as you say, not on. But the reason you didn't get married, so therefore that was in part a sacrifice to your career, wasn't it? At one stage you said, I don't think my fans would accept it, or, rather like a priest, at another stage, I need all my time and concentration for my career. I mean, so were you making a conscious sacrifice?
No, I don't remember it being that way. I mean, I know Steve in his book writes it that way, and you see, it's always with hindsight. The book's written with hindsight. I can look back and say, yes, of course, now I can analyze those early days, and I remember, and it's documented in the book. I do remember the girlfriend I was going out with at the time, we squeezed into a car, she sat on my lap, and I saw girls at the stage door treading on my photograph. It was very upsetting. I was 18, 19 years old. And the strange thing is, I'm really glad it's changed now, but in those days, well, I mean, Dave, you remember them as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, for some unknown reason, how did it come about that we as rock stars of that era were really not allowed by our fans to have girlfriends, let alone be married? John Lennon kept his wife a secret when he first became known as John of the Beatles. And the pressure was there. I don't know who wrote that rule, but it's gone now, so it doesn't matter. But in those days, and that's when I got started, that kind of pressure was there. And of course, the fear of losing fans was mighty. I mean, now I'm old enough to realize now that if I lost fans for that reason, they probably weren't great fans to start off. Than most 18-year-olds are now. We all were, I think. It worried me. So yes, I can look back and say, yes, probably I made up my mind that I wasn't going to do this. I'd rather have a career than be married at the moment. And it saw me through the first 5 or 6 years of my career.
And you've mentioned some of the pluses. I suppose the minus is everybody says you're terrific with children, and you might have liked to have some of your own.
Well, there were times when I thought, again, with the Shadows, my closest friends were all having babies, and I enjoyed the kids. They were great, and I enjoy my sister's children. But I don't know any. I don't even think of them in those terms anymore. I mean, I really enjoy my sister's families. I have 10 nephews and nieces, and now 1 great nephew. And yes, I am good with them, I think. I think I make a darn good uncle. Whether I'd have been a good father, I don't know. We all pride ourselves on thinking we're going to be great parents. But I don't sit around thinking, gosh, I wish I had a son, who'd become next generation's Cliff Richard, because the chances are he probably wouldn't, and wouldn't even want to. So I don't have any ego in that area. Not that it's egotistical to have children, but for me it would be kind of egotistical to think, I've got to pass on my genes.
Oh. Well, you could, yeah. I'm sure you could. I'm sure you could auction your genes. Yeah. However old a pair, you could do it right here. But and incidentally, talking to Steve Turner, we should add, by the way, that the one brief encounter, just so everyone's quite clear about it, was with a girl and was not with a man, right? Yes. And there's
yes,
disappointed about that. Yeah.
It's true.
But does that annoy you when people say, oh, he must be strange because he's not married, or have you taken that goes with the course?
It used to annoy me, but now it doesn't. I mean, I realize now that they think all sorts of people are strange because they just don't do the things that they do, you know, and it's an area that I think all of us have to deal with, that when we meet people who are not the same as us, we can't assume that somehow we are the superior people. All I know is that in a way it's fortunate that it's happened to me now. I mean, I'm in the right generation to be a single male because there are more men than women now. Whereas earlier on, of course, it was the other way around. That's why there were always spinsters in stories and the tales that were told. Now it'll be bachelors. We're going to have to learn. Men are going to have to learn to live single and still be positive, you know, members of society.
You're going to have to reissue Bachelor Boy.
Yes.
That was a big hit, wasn't it?
It was. Huge hit. I mean, it was prophetic. Neither Bruce and I who wrote it had no intention or idea that it might be prophetic for one of us. It certainly wasn't prophetic for Bruce, but it was for me.
Tell me, we were talking about Christianity earlier on. Do you believe in God, or do you know there is a God?
Both, really. And again, it's also subjective. What I know, I can't impart. I can't, you know...
You can't prove.
No, that's right. It would be so wonderful if we could just get a blackboard and say, here's the formula. If you follow this, at the end of it, you'll know, see, touch, whatever it is, God. And it just doesn't work that way. Except in one area, I think God has been particularly clever, and that is that he penetrated time in the form of Jesus. So we have at least one part of Christianity which is historical, archaeological, provable. And to me, that's the wonderful part, that in fact, if I ever have any doubts, which I don't anymore actually, I used to have perhaps doubts earlier on, but now I don't. But if ever I was to have a doubt, I would immediately go back to the historical fact that is Jesus. And once you start there, the minute you agree that there was a Jesus, then you yourself have a problem to discover whether he was the Son of God, and if he was, the Son of who?
But have you actually felt his presence in a room?
I felt his presence, yeah, but not in a physical way, you know. I can remember, for instance, very early on in my Christian life, I still do accept invitations to speak as a Christian at, I don't know, school, unions, colleges, churches. And one time I was invited to the Enfield School of Technology by a group of Christians, and I went there, and the place was hubbub. They did everything but throw seats at me. And I was terrified, and I just, in my head, because the wonderful thing about prayer is that you don't have to say it out loud. And I just said, oh, God, what am I doing here, you know? I didn't ask for this. I don't think I deserve this. Get me out of it. And at the end of it, they said, you know, that's the best meeting we've ever had here. It's the first time they didn't break up everything. And I thought, wow. So I felt protected at that stage. And there have been other times, too. There was have I got time?
Yeah, just, yes.
Oh, there was another time...
Yeah, I want to finish this one, yeah.
Okay, when I was working with I was talking, in fact, to, well, it was just the public, but we used a student area. It was in the a university up north. And while we started the first meeting, and blow me down, a whole bunch of the Gay Liberation Front came in. Now, this is interesting. People actually say I'm gay, and yet they really tear into me when they do meet me. They have a terrible go at me. So anyway, these people came in dressed as, I don't know, nuns and things like that. It was very funny. Nuns with a beard line. And they destroyed the meeting. And again, I feel God overruled, because what happened was when we came off stage, the organizers said, look, we had no idea that these students were going to come in. The actual public couldn't get in because of the students being in there, and that they're the ones that we were doing it for. Can you stay? I said, well, if you can get the public, fine. I just happen to have 2 hours. And we did it all again, and it was fine. So no one can tell me that there isn't a supernatural element that's involved in taking over situations and making them happen the way he wants them to happen. So yes, I felt his presence in that respect. I've never felt anybody go like that, or a voice say, get off the stage, Cliff.
Listen, they're never going to say, get off the stage, Cliff. It's been a delight having you with us.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you, and I suppose putting it all together, God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cliff Richard, ladies and gentlemen. Cliff Richard.